So how might Rusty protect himself from this? Well, we know that Rusty only gets to keep his Bitcoins if a transaction to him makes its way to the longest chain. And as we know, the longest chain could be forked early on. To provide some confidence in the immutability of the transaction, he can look for what we call confirmations. Instead of just accepting a transaction as valid when he sees it floating around the network or when it first makes its way into a block, Rusty waits for the transaction to get a certain number of confirmations. A confirmation is defined as a number of blocks built off of some particular block. In this diagram, there's a block holding my transaction to Rusty, and there are 2 blocks built on top of that. This means that there are 2 confirmations on this block. The more confirmations a transaction has, the harder it is to double spend, since a malicious miner such as myself would have to fork the chain starting from before the block that contains the transaction and mine fast enough to surpass the honest chain. This is a reasonably simple concept, but we can see some interesting things that involve confirmations. The question that you're probably asking: how many confirmations does Rusty need before he feels confident about the finality of his transaction? Well, let's go back to the example with me and Rusty. Rusty gotten wiser from the last time I double spent on him, so now he's going to wait for some confirmations before sending the iPhone. Let's say he waits for K confirmations. This means that he waits for K blocks to be built on top of his transaction before deeming the transaction finalized. From my perspective, I now need to find a way for Rusty's transaction to get K confirmation, but then I need to find a way to produce a longer chain containing the conflicting transaction spending from the exact same UTXO. This longer chain will invalidate Rusty's transaction. The way I do this is by starting a private chain containing my own malicious transaction, mine K blocks, and then broadcast the chain after Rusty has sent the iPhone to me. By doing so, I will have received the good and have kept my own Bitcoin. A quick note: in this demonstration, I will mine K+1 blocks on top of the block that contains my own transaction to myself. If I mine just K blocks, I would have caught up with the rest of the network. But if I want to invalidate the honest chain with a transaction from me to Rusty, my chain has to be longer, hence the +1. Let's go ahead and see a demonstration.